96 cores, 192 gigabytes of just VRAM with our dual RTX Pro 6000s. This is our Falcon Talon system configured with an AMD Threadripper Pro 9995WX from AMD. This system, it's a foregone conclusion. Can it run Crysis? Well, no, actually, because the original Crysis crashes when you have that much VRAM. But you can run 8 instances of Crysis because then each one gets 24 gigs of VRAM. Did you know that you can just run out and buy the world's most advanced computing desktop with 96 cores? This is from Falcon Northwest. It's 96 cores of insane workstation. It's Threadripper Pro, not Threadripper, Threadripper Pro. Double the memory channels and 96 cores, because of course. Now, this video is primarily about the 96 core Threadripper Pro, the 9995WX, and the kind of performance that you can expect from it. But if you're going to benchmark a Threadripper 9995WX, why not do it with some style? If you're going to turn a DeLorean into a time machine, why not do it with some style? Falcon Northwest has customized this case for me just a little bit. They've also got some amazing Threadripper artwork on the other side. If you're going to, kill some time, render time is what they're talking about. But also, they know that we're going to use this machine for a lot of AI and machine learning. Teaching Sand to think was indeed a mistake. Store.level1text.com. They also took some artwork from our past videos, and Brian, 8-bit Brian, oh Lord, this thing's made of metal and glass. It's very heavy. 66 pounds of ship weight. The light inside is broken, but I still work. That's actually a reference to the fact that this machine doesn't have any RGB, as it should be. All things are okay in the universe. Inside, Blackwell Pro RTX 6000, or RTX Pro 6000, the Blackwell edition. That's actually my card in there. I didn't get yet another Blackwell because, good Lord. But yes, AMD has sent a 96-core processor, and this is the chariot we shall use. The Asus WRX90 Sage SE. This is, again, the new 9000 series processors drop right into their existing 7000 series counterpart motherboards with a BIOS update. And a BIOS update has been updated. We've also got our Silverstone AIO, which there is at least a dozen of those in this office running various tasks. And AIOs tend to, this is a good one. This is a good AIO that is designed for a server context. You have Kingston memory in here. I think this is configured with 256 gigabytes. We're going to step all the way up to 512 gigabytes and all the way down to 64 gigabytes because it does make a difference. Dual rank DIMMs populating all 8 memory channels is your sweet spot for performance. That's what is configured in here. It is going to be awesome. But we can also step up to 512 gigabytes. DDR5 6400 also supported on the Pro platform, which is a big step up over the 7000 series counterpart because that is a fully qualified speed. There's JetX 6400 and there's Expo 6400, but JetX 6400 is entirely attainable and stable on this platform. Falcon's been using the Talon case for a long time. I was especially impressed with it in our Xeon build. That is from 2023. My goodness, time flies. It had no problem dealing with the heat output and the heat production from that system. I actually talked to Kelt at Falcon Northwest about this system, and one of the things that we discovered with the Threadripper 7000 series is that depending on what memory kit you're running, certain enterprise memory kits have a relatively low throttling point because they expect a ridiculous amount of airflow. And that it's not a problem, but it is a design consideration. And so we chatted about that. It's like, okay, what did you do to address the fact that your DIMMs can use upwards of 15 watts each? How are you managing the cooling for that? And it turns out the specific design and geometry of this case, because it's a relatively short depth, it doesn't have as much air pressure fall off from the front fans, and that provides adequate cooling even for some of the high wattage DIMMs. And so there is no throttling in this configuration, even though we're at a disadvantaged, in my opinion, configuration with our RTX 6000. This is blowing hot air directly onto the DIMMs. This is a 600 watt card. It's dumping 600 watts upward. That is a problem for the DIMMs that are located directly above this first PCIe slot. But Falcon Northwest has qualified and dealt with that specific thing. In fact, when we were chatting about it, if you need me to explain that to you in meme form, it was like in Iron Man when they're flying along and it's like, so what did you do about the icing problem? And it's like, oh, here's the thing that we did, as opposed to what happened in Iron Man. So good job, Falcon Northwest. My God, it's such thick metal. Fortunately, if you've never unpacked a computer before, there's also this handy chart explaining to you that the front comes off, and there's a dust filter on the bottom for the power supply, and there's a dust filter in the front, and you can take the sides off. If you want just a plain matte black option, they can give you a plain matte black option. You don't have to get fancy side panels, but if you want to, it is a lot of fun. I'm having a lot of fun because 96 cores is insane, and because I need special power cords in order to be able to run two 600-watt GPUs in this configuration. Two 300-watt max Q GPUs, a little bit more attainable, but there's another box they ship. This is the other box. And look, I've got my Falcon Northwest mug, and also some fresh coffee. Oh, the caffeine. We're going to need the caffeine to be up all night to benchmark this thing. Also a fancy desk mat. Mine came with a Seasonic power supply, so this is the extra Seasonic power cables. And then there's also the accessory box. This is an OS reinstallation key and some server accessories. There's the DisplayPort cables. This is so that you can go out of your GPU and into the Thunderbolt connection to be able to do Thunderbolt 4. Theoretically, that supports up to DisplayPort 1.4 because you can go out of your GPU and then back into the motherboard and then out of the motherboard via the USB-C connection. And so the cables to do that are in here. There's some extra temperature sensors in here if you want to run extra temperature sensors, SATA cables, just the leftover accessories that you would have if you were building such a system yourself. Oh, there's also a handy mounting bracket for GPUs like my RTX Pro 6000, which this should be in there. I missed this. Sorry. That's okay. We're going to be changing GPUs constantly anyway. But if it was a permanent installation, this holds the GPU at the end. This is a mounting bracket. This is awesome. Makes it much more shippable with this bracket installed. And if you ordered a system from Falcon, you're going to have mounting brackets for that stuff. And even just the small attention to detail, like putting the reinstallation USB on a card like this so that you don't lose the tiny little USB stick. It's good. It's good thinking. The paper packet that's included with this has some details about your system installation and specific configuration and that sort of stuff. Keep that for your records. Pure computing bliss. Just add OLED monitor. Unlimited power. It's booting! And in fact, it's booted. There's 5 icons on the desktop and we're ready to compute. How awesome is that? All right. That's enough of that. Luxuriant as this chariot is that's carrying our AMD 9995WX, thanks to Falcon Northwest, we're here to talk about the 9995WX and its capabilities. Well, who's this CPU for? I found it necessary to break down the answer to that into the WRX90 platform question and the CPU question. Two different things. As you probably saw in my TRX50 reviews, AMD has updated their high-end enthusiast platforms. New CPUs drop into the old platforms, in other words. And as high-end as insane as those platforms are, 32 and 64 cores, up to a terabyte of memory, as a practical matter, the limitations of TRX50 will gate entrance into this platform, WRX90, to people that are looking for more memory capacity and memory bandwidth, as well as people that are looking for PCIe. I mean, right now, if you want to try to get 128 or 256 gigabyte DIMM, especially one that can do 6400 mega transfers, well, I mean, the practical limit of TRX50 is actually not 1 terabyte. It's probably 512 gigabytes, maybe just 256. Whereas on this platform, you get at least double that because you got twice as many memory channels. It's double the memory bandwidth, double the channels. And with the bump from 7000 to 9000 series, we get the bump from 5200 mega transfers to 6400. That's quite a lot of a bump. And for a lot of workloads, that is significant, especially AI workloads, but also creative workloads. And while we're on the subject of memory, yes, this is an RDIMM only platform. But the good news, it's a lot more affordable because you've got twice as memory slots. I mean, you can get 64 gig DIMMs, maybe soon 128 gig DIMMs, and then put them in all 8 slots. I mean, look at all the PCIe slots too on WRX90. I'm lobbying Asus to properly support X8 bifurcation. Probably by the time you watch this video, it'll be there. And there's a lot of extreme users in our user community that are building fantastic AI boxes that have tons of GPUs. A lot of enthusiasts there, and being able to do that with your slots is sort of fun, although you're going to have to get creative with your cable routing and your chassis. It won't be as small and amazing as this. Suffice it to say, with PCIe, WRX90 is for slot enthusiasts. This platform also has an ASPEED 2600. Our Asus Sage also has dual 10 gigabit Ethernet. It also has 4 onboard PCIe Gen 5 M.2 lanes, plus 2 Gen 4 Slim SAS connections for even more SSDs. That's 6 10 gigabit Type A ports and 2 USB 4 Thunderbolt compatible ports. Those are powered by the ASMedia ASM 4242 controller, if memory serves. And that controller even has 2 mini DisplayPort inputs, so you can mix you're going to take DisplayPort 1.4 up to in from a GPU and then into the mini DisplayPort connections. The cables for that are included in the box. So it's basically a cable. I can take a cable from our RTX Pro 6000 to the mini DP in, and then that USB-C connection provides both USB and display up to DisplayPort 1.4. Then you'll have an external display. Now, this machine in its current configuration has an RTX Pro 6000, which also supports something cool called multi-instance GPU. Big. This GPU can show up as 4 GPUs, each with 24 gigs of VRAM. That's a huge boon to virtualization, and this platform with 96 cores and all those PCIe lanes is great for VFIO, pass-through virtualization. Oh, and if you do enable MIG mode, it does actually disable the physical DisplayPort outputs. So plan for that accordingly. You're going to have to use the onboard, out-of-band management, use it as a server, something like that. It's off-label use case. But having a device that can do SR-IOV and pass-through and a workstation to lab conversions, this thing can be an entire Active Directory forest with a dozen virtual machines or more. That's not a problem. So it looks like there's 2 GPUs in here, but with multi-instance GPU, it'll actually show up to the system as 4 discrete 24 gig GPUs, each with their own resources on a partition. And I'm better at that in Linux than I am Windows. I'm still trying to get that to work in sort of a Hyper-V scenario, but on Linux, it's pretty easy, as long as your VBIOS on your card is newer than 2.55. That was an uphill battle for me. I actually suffered for a long time trying to get that to work, even before Threadripper Pro was out. But fortunately, NVIDIA's got to fix newer VBIOS, so if you've got a launch day RTX Pro 6000, you're going to need a new VBIOS. It fixes a lot of bugs. 8 instances of Crysis running. And for storage, Kioxia CM7, these E3 modules on a PCIe carrier. Yeah, it's a little aftermarket. I did that. But that's how we can pack in 60 terabytes of CM7 storage on top of our M.2 storage based on the Kingston Fury, 4 terabyte M.2. You could pack in a lot of storage in here, 75 terabytes. And there's still room to add more storage if we want to. Our power budget is not bad. I mean, remember that our 96 core CPU non-overclocked power budget's on the order of 350 watt TDP. Let's just call that 500 watts, give or take 400 watts. And our GPUs are 600 watts each. And you can do that on a North American breaker. That's not really much of a problem. The thing that surprised me is that we're basically giving each instance of Crysis its own 8-core chiplet, and we still have 4 chiplets left over. So this thing can still do anything that you want to do. The one thing with multi-instance GPU is it disables the outputs. So in order to do that, I've either got to add another GPU to this, remote into it, or use the onboard VGA, which is fine. It's fine, but yeah, it's insane to me that there's a system that is so monstrous that it could just casually do this. It can just casually have 8 discrete 24 gigabyte VRAM GPUs from just 2 physical cards. It is a marvel of modern engineering. And you might be wondering, can the board keep up with all of that? Yes, it absolutely can. The Asus WRX90 workstation board, the Sage, is designed to deliver all of that and even just power. It's a 350 watt TDP CPU, but this board can rock over 1100 watts into the CPU completely stable. And since we're talking about high-end I/O and experimentation, here's our smart modular CXL device. It's bumping our system memory from 512 gigabytes to 768. Via PCIe Gen 5 add-ins, and that will enable lots of fun workflows, maybe unlock some stuff for you with AI. It's not as full-featured as Epic, like you would get with Epic CXL functionality, but it is worth knowing that it's kind of sort of there. Check out our other video, CXL on Threadripper, for the full breakdown on that. We'll cover that there. That applies to WRX90 as well. It's a lot of words to say that this platform was and still is serious business for anybody who depends on the computer to get their work done, and a lot of horsepower and just general insanity. Now, with the platform out of the way, down to the CPU itself. The 9995WX is the top of the stack. 96 cores, 192 threads. It is a monster, make no mistake. But this isn't just bigger number for bragging rights. There are real architectural implications here, especially when you go from 32 to 64 to 96 cores. Here's 96 copies of Doom running while I'm also running Cinebench 24. What's wild is that the jump from 32 to 64 cores can sometimes give you, more memory bandwidth and that sort of thing. It's not just the cores. It's because of how AMD is wiring up the chiplets to the I/O die. And that's something interesting with Threadripper, I think. Each chiplet has its own path to the I/O die. That connection, the GMI, is how the chiplet reaches memory. More chiplets means more GMI links are active, which increases the effective memory throughput across the system. That is why the 64-core part might edge out the 32-core part in memory-bound workloads on WRX 90 because it has 8 memory channels available to it. And technically, the memory channels are, through the I/O die, but it's the chiplet that makes it busy, in other words. The Threadripper architecture here is also something interesting versus EPYC. Like EPYC, there's a 9575F. That's a 64-core CPU, but each chiplet has 2 GMI links instead of 1. And that's how it manages to feed the chiplets from the 12-channel memory controller, as opposed to 8 here. That EPYC CPU has a 5 gigahertz boost and a higher TDP at 400 watts. And that is a serious contender if your number one wish is memory bandwidth. But the 9995WX gives you something that the EPYC platform does not, and that is overclocking. Yes, overclocking. TRX Pro 9000 series is unlocked, as were its predecessors. And that's where things get really interesting. For all core workloads, renders, simulations, compiles for particularly large projects, I've been running the chip overclocked in our configuration here, and the uplift is around 18% performance, across the board. We're talking about a jump from 350 watts stock TDP to an average of about 700 watts during these sustained workloads, and no instability. Now that's on Falcon Northwest's tuned BIOS configuration and our Silverstone AIO that they implement in this chassis. It's a champ. And this is not a normal case of the CPU just doing its thing. This is something special. So yeah, the 9995WX isn't just a flex. It's a tool, and it's a big, heavy-duty, possibly rack mount if you want it, tool in a desktop chassis in this configuration. And with the right tuning, it gets even better. But there is a catch. You'd better know what you're doing if you're jumping into a system with this many cores. How does your workload scale? That is an important question to ask. Where's the bottleneck? Is the bottleneck actually the CPU? Is it the GPU? Is it memory? Is it I/O? Just throwing more cores at a problem doesn't necessarily make it go faster. That's not necessarily the most wise investment. If you're GPU limited, 32 cores is probably more than enough to feed the pipeline. And in that case, adding a second GPU might get you a bigger speed up than going to the 96 core CPU. Falcon Northwest can help you around that if you have that type of quandary. You can also hit us up in the Level 1 Techs forum, because we've done that with ComSol and computational fluid dynamics and photogrammetry and all sorts of fun, interesting things. Speaking of CFD, computational fluid dynamics, the jump from 32 to 64 cores makes sense just about every time. But 64 to 96 cores, the diminishing returns. It's a little bit Amdahl's law in action. Your return on investment depends on understanding your workload. Sometimes cores help, sometimes not. It's the same story with photogrammetry. If you have an absurdly large job with a lot of threads, it can help. But the software has to know how to break the problem into chunks that will run appropriately on the hardware. We've seen certain jobs scale themselves really well. We've seen other jobs not really scale all that well to a ton of cores. It just depends. Creative workloads, that's another beast entirely. We're working on a follow-up video that involves Houdini and VFX production type tasks on this system against other Threadripper workstation systems, including TRX 50, just to see how it works. Because again, your problem and how it scales depends on the software. What's unusual here, though, is that our canned creative workload benchmarks are meaningless on this platform. This system has scaled beyond the benchmarks. This thing is so monstrous that our usual canned creative workload benchmarks are meaningless. The projects aren't large enough to really show a difference from 32 to 64 to 96 cores. But I can tell you with some real world projects with 12K textures and our hardware 422 decode that we can do on our RTX Pro are making some jaw-dropping differences in the results. But you're going to have to wait a little bit longer before we talk numbers in that kind of a context. And if you work in that industry, I want to hear from you on the forum so that we can understand what you do. If you're finding what you have now doesn't have enough horsepower, you need to understand where your bottlenecks are and what software you're using, and if your software has had the investment to go multi-core. But here's the thing. AMD has been so good and so consistent about delivering real performance gains across generations that software vendors are actually making serious investments to scale multi-core seriously. Look what we've seen with DaVinci Resolve. In a way, the capabilities with 422 and 96 gigs of VRAM that we see from RTX Pro are here because the corresponding CPU platform has become monstrous enough to feed a monstrous GPU like that. Software companies have to be willing to make that kind of an investment in their software ecosystem to take multi-core seriously. We're seeing better and better thread schedulers, better resource utilization, and better results. And it's not always at the 96 core scale, but it is scaling better every day. Oh, and by the way, my Doom test here, it actually works better if I run four virtual machines, each running 100 copies of Doom. Yeah, 400 copies of Doom. We're only using like 4 or 5 of the 12 chiplets that way. It's kind of wild. It's kind of mind-blowing. Listen, I was doing this and I forgot one of the VMs was running with 100 copies of Doom until I noticed Cinebench. I was like, why is Cinebench like 500 points lower? I was like, oh yeah, that VM's... I couldn't, just using the machine, I forgot the VM was running. Couldn't even feel it, which is interesting. One last thing we tested, storage. 4 Crucial T705 SSDs in RAID 0. The bandwidth, absolutely unhinged. When you've got a small nation state's worth of cores, CPU-based NVMe RAID doesn't bottleneck. It bulldozes. See what I did there? Bulldozes? It's a war you can win with just sheer attrition. Even 32 PCIe lanes dedicated to storage will work just fine on this platform. You need more storage than that? It's also possible to add enterprise-class U.2 drives to this configuration. Falcon has done builds with 60 terabyte drives and beyond. For special needs, obviously, it's no problem. If you need it, they can build it. So yeah. Threadripper is the fastest workstation available, and this configuration, this one right here, is the apex predator among all other 9995WX configurations because there's no limits. They don't hold you back. If your workload demands the absolute best and you know how to configure your job, then this is it. And thanks again to Falcon Northwest for sending this over so that I could test drive that 9995WX. As always, we have more deep dives planned and real-world workloads and a special video on AI and using AI for this platform. You can also check out some of the builds in our forum where crazy people have shoved 8 GPUs onto this motherboard. You can run 4 Max-Q in this, like I said, or 2 of the RTX Pros, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm Wendell. This is level 1. This has been as quick a look as I could do on the 9995WX Pro, but yeah, it's something. All right, if you have any questions or you want to run your workload or clue me in on some other kind of job where it's like, I wonder if this will scale. I wonder what's going on here. Let me know so we can put the nation state of cores to use. All right, I'm signing out. You can find me in the level 1 forums.